Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Eric Florup with C-TRAN, and we're here live for an online open house to talk about proposed service changes for 2022. I want to start by saying welcome to everyone who is joining us live on the C-TRAN Facebook page, or perhaps you're watching the recording afterward. Either way, just want to say thank you for taking the time to be informed, to make your voice heard, and for helping C-TRAN provide better service in Clark County. So today's event is part of a series of open house meetings that C-TRAN has hosted this summer, both in person and now online. Public feedback is a huge part of any significant change to our service. In other words, your feedback is why we're here. A little bit later, we're going to have a live Q&A as part of this event, so feel free to drop your questions into the comments now if you're watching live, or go ahead and drop your thoughts just to weigh in. So now to the proposal. For 2022, C-TRAN is proposing a series of changes that reflect changes both in rider demands and also represent an improvement in efficiency and cost effectiveness. We're proposing changes to a few of our existing express routes and also a few local routes. We're also proposing a new microtransit service that will expand access and convenience for areas now served by the connector, plus some new service areas that don't currently have that service. Before we get into the details, just a little bit of background, the fine print, if you will. I want to say to clarify that none of these proposals at this time is final. Concepts can and sometimes do change based on the feedback that we hear from the public. Again, that's why we're here. There are a couple of additional open house meetings that are scheduled for later this summer, plus a public hearing at the C-TRAN Board of Directors on September 14th. And the C-TRAN board is the group that will ultimately give final approval for any changes that are made to happen later this fall. So to get into the specific concepts, I'm going to bring in Taylor Eit. He is our senior planner here at C-TRAN and was heavily involved in developing these concepts that we have here. Taylor, welcome.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you to everyone joining us here today.
Thank you. And as I mentioned, we want to hear from you. Again, that's why we're here. So feel free, if you're watching on Facebook right now, you can ask questions or share your thoughts in the comments on this post. I also want to point out that we have set up an online comment form at c-tran.com that you can use anytime, and we'll be accepting comments throughout the duration of this outreach period that will ultimately shape what the changes are. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Taylor to take it away.
Thank you. And as Eric mentioned, these proposed changes really have two primary focuses. First, on the modernization of our connector program to a microtransit style program. And second, on matching express routes to ridership demand. We're looking at changes to the connector and implementation of microtransit to make point-to-point transit easier to understand and use and more readily available throughout the system, including some of our more hard-to-reach areas. Ridership on our express routes has changed pretty dramatically since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and after closely monitoring system performance over the past year plus, we've identified proposed changes that provide a level of service that aligns more closely with observed and anticipated future demand in order to allow our riders to be able to get where they need to go. We'll look at each proposed microtransit change in a little bit more detail first. Eric, if you want to go ahead there. Thank you. Microtransit is really just a technical term for a new kind of transit platform, generally based on the use of technology to improve a user experience. It's how we're describing this upgrade from the existing connector dial-a-ride type of service. It's sort of like a transition from manual cars to automatic cars in the way that it allows a lot more people to be able to use a service more efficiently and effectively. Similar to many common rideshare services or taxis, anyone, and that means you, can use microtransit to travel to any destination within a defined service area. This means you can take a trip from home to school or to the park, take a family trip to the grocery store or to visit the grandparents, grab lunch while you're at work, or connect with your express bus or other route at a nearby transit center or transfer stop. Most people will plan and book rides with a smartphone application. And just like other rideshares, you'll have information about your trip and the ability to book right at your fingertips. You'll be able to monitor your trip in real time with a map display of your driver's location, view your estimated arrival time, and get live trip and status updates. This will continue to be a C-TRAN owned and operated service that will use smaller buses to take people from point A to point B within a service area, and you can see them all on the maps here. Just like common rideshare companies that pool riders, you might find yourself sharing a bus with other riders on the way to each of your respective destinations. But don't worry, you'll never have to go too far out of the way. There's a few important ways this service will be different from the connector that you see today. One, you can book rides without needing to call the driver an hour and a half or more before you need a ride. It will be completely on demand, so you can book a trip right when you need it. And we're removing trips with a fixed route so that you can be sure a vehicle will be available at your fingertips for your trips, including round trips when and where you need them. Each microtransit service will have a few common features. First, they'll have expanded hours of operation, so you can use them anytime Monday through Friday between 5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Two, you can go between any two locations anywhere in the microtransit service area for virtually any reason, or you can use it to connect with nearby transit centers or transit stops. More on that in a minute. You'll only pay the fixed price of C-TRAN's local fare. That means no surge pricing, and it won't matter how far your trip is. You can pay with cash or tap your credit card or hop card. Transfers are accepted, and your fare will cap if you're using a hop card. You'll also always be riding with professional C-TRAN drivers in a fully accessible, bike rack equipped C-TRAN vehicle. As far as where you can use this service, that'll be all of the existing connector zones, Camas, La Center, Richfield, and Rose Village, but we're also proposing to add two new zones. One connecting people in the WSU Vancouver Salmon Creek area, and the other helping people get to and around the industrial areas near the Port of Vancouver. In the WSU Vancouver Salmon Creek area, you'll be able to get anywhere in the service area, including WSU Vancouver, iTech Prep, Clark County Fairgrounds, many medical campuses, or you can connect to the 99th Street Transit Center and Salmon Creek Park and Ride. We know that getting to work in and around the Port of Vancouver and Centennial Industrial Park can be a challenge with transit, so this service will help make nonstop connections for riders traveling to or from downtown Vancouver or other C-TRAN routes. For people that enjoy a nice ride on Amtrak, you'll now have a connection to the Vancouver Amtrak station. To serve riders as efficiently as possible, we're planning two service periods here that align with shift schedules for most employees. That's 5:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. and 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. As I mentioned before, all existing connector zones will be upgraded to this new platform and style of service. That's expanded hours with a continuous service span to create more trip options. No more midday gap, so feel free to take a ride to get lunch. If your trip takes you outside the service area, you'll be able to easily connect to a nearby transit center or transfer stop. For Rose Village, that means you can ride from Walmart to the YWCA on 33rd, get to an appointment at the VA, or get downtown for fun, or to transfer to 12th and Washington, 12th and Broadway, Turtle Place, or Broadway and Evergreen. Camas will see a bigger change, literally, as we're proposing to expand the area served to include the entire cities of Camas and Washougal. That means you can take a trip from Camas High School to the Washougal waterfront, or cool off at the Sandy swimming hole and grab lunch at the sushi joint in downtown Camas. Or get to Fisher's Landing and hop an express to downtown Portland. In Ridgefield and La Center, you'll be able to go anywhere in each city. So meet friends in downtown Ridgefield, then head to a Raptors game, or go to the post office from Southview Heights in La Center. You can also connect to Junction Park and Ride near I-5 and Pioneer Parkway from anywhere in Ridgefield or La Center. Since these vehicles will be fully on demand, to make local trips and round trips possible, we're proposing a new fixed route bus for trips to and from 99th Street Transit Center. Eric, go ahead to local. There we go. We're only making a few changes to local C-TRAN routes at this time, but we do anticipate more in the future. The new Route 48 will get you from the Park and Ride in Ridgefield to 99th Street Transit Center on a bigger bus. People near Discovery Ridge will be able to get on at stops near Rose Hours and the Vancouver Clinic. You'll be able to make hourly trips during the morning and evening, as well as a few midday trips. On Route 74, we've heard from many people that a new stop near Heritage Plaza is needed. Because of the high speed traffic on 4th Plane, we're looking for your input on where to place a stop based on destinations that are important to you, such as Safeway, IQ Credit Union, Goldie's Barbecue, or new housing just north of 4th Plane. There, go ahead to express routes, please. For those of you that have been riding express routes over the last year plus, you may have noticed it's looked a little different. With changing trip patterns and needs, we're focusing on express corridors rather than individual routes so that we can make sure these services are efficient and effective, and we can respond to changes as needed. In the I-5 corridor, we're proposing to consolidate all I-5 service into the 105, so riders won't see signs or buses for routes 134, 157, or 199. Those of you riding Route 190 won't be affected by these changes. People that have used the 105 in the past will continue to be able to use it the same as today, with expanded all-day service between Salmon Creek, 99th Street, downtown Vancouver, and downtown Portland. We're also planning additional earlier morning and later evening trips. For folks that ride the 134 or 199, you'll still be able to take direct trips to and from Salmon Creek Park and Ride and 99th Street Transit Center to downtown Portland, bypassing downtown Vancouver. These trips will be labeled separately, like the 105X, during the morning and evening commutes. We're also planning to reroute the 105 through the Rose Quarter in downtown Portland, making travel times more consistent and providing connections to the Lloyd District for Route 157 riders or other transfers. By rerouting through the Rose Quarter, we don't expect your overall trip time to change, but your travel times through downtown Portland will be more consistent because your bus will be in a lane reserved only for transit. In the I-205 corridor, we're proposing to expand the availability of service to meet more rider needs and more closely match trips available in the I-5 corridor. With this proposal, Route 164 riders will see new earlier and later trips, and for the first time, midday service every 60 minutes or so, much like the 105. Due to changing demand and to make trips more reliable, we're also proposing to adjust the frequency of trips to every 20 minutes or so during peak periods. Route 177, which has been suspended for the duration of the pandemic, will be permanently discontinued. And those are our proposed changes for January. At this time, I'll toss it back to Eric.
Thank you, Taylor, for that rundown of what's being proposed. Really appreciate the detail there. So let's move on to the Q&A portion of our open house meeting. We're getting several comments already on the page, which is fantastic. Keep them coming. Michelle says, love C-TRAN to go on errands to and from work. Michelle, thank you for writing. Really glad that you're able to use our service. Mac says, hi C-TRAN, I love the buses and how clean they are. Thank you, Mac, for that comment. Our maintenance group does a fantastic job of keeping our buses clean and ready to roll out every single day. So I want to go to Microtransit. As you would expect, Taylor, this is a new type of service for us. As a result of that, obviously, it's generated quite a bit of interest from the public and the comments we've received so far. So Susanna, who weighed in just now, asks, does it take a long wait time? Can you just get into detail about what sort of wait times folks would be looking at for a service like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, right now, for those of you that ride the connector, you may know that we need you to call in about 90 minutes or more in advance to book a ride so that we can make sure that a vehicle is available for you. With this new service and using a mobile application, you'll be able to book a trip when you need it. And it's our goal for a vehicle to be available for your trip within 15 minutes or less. That may not always be the case, but more likely than not, you'll be able to have a vehicle to your location pretty promptly.
Great. And to expand on microtransit a little bit, just to back up a step or two, some of the comments we've received to this point might ask, and these are in past open houses, we've had folks just kind of asking about the service itself, the type of service. And somebody might say, well, why don't you just put a fixed route bus to these areas? So I just was hoping, Taylor, you could expand on why this type of service is a good fit with this on-demand model that we're talking about in these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. We use on-demand service and this microtransit style service typically in areas where traditional fixed routes are a little bit harder to serve as many people as possible and make a lot of trip connections. This could be for a number of reasons based on the terrain and topography of an area, the land use, or what sort of destinations are in that area and how far or spread apart people are there. So in order to be able to cover as many people as possible with these services, microtransit is a really great option that can make this service available to everyone as efficiently as possible.
Great. And Susanna also asks, what about the 19 to Salmon Creek? And I want to just clarify, there's no change proposed to the 19, so that route is going to continue to run as it does today. This would be a supplement to that, an extra option for folks in that area and the surrounding area in Salmon Creek. Is that right, Taylor?
That's absolutely correct. We're looking at microtransit as a way to enhance access to a lot of our existing transit services or help make other connections that aren't quite as well served by some of the routes that we have today. But we're looking forward to seeing how microtransit and our fixed routes are able to work together to make a more comprehensive uh, access for transit and for the region we serve.
Great. One more question on microtransit before we move on. This is one that we received before today from a writer named Boyd who asked about the booking platform. This person explains that he and others may not have the preference to use a mobile app to book their rides, or maybe don't have the ability to do that. What other options are there for folks who want to book a ride on microtransit but don't want to use the app?
Absolutely. Great question and a really important point for us. We know that people access our system and information about it in a number of different ways. So, your go to way to access this service will traditionally be an application on a mobile phone, but we absolutely want to make sure that people know that they'll be able to access this service by a website that you can use on your computer or another public computer. You'll be able to call in to our customer service who will book a trip for you, very similarly to the connector or C-VAN for those of you that may use C-VAN today. And we're looking at exploring other ways to make sure that everyone is able to take advantage of this new and convenient service.
Great. And then one additional comment actually from a writer named Taylor who sent this in ahead of time. Taylor says, I enthusiastically support the creation of a new WSUV Salmon Creek zone because it fills a much needed gap in service coverage. He goes on to say, WSUV is currently a very car-oriented campus, creating systemic barriers for anyone who relies on public transit. Expanding coverage would increase equitable access to education. Please make it easier to ride public transportation around the WSUV Salmon Creek area. Thank you for your time. To Ryder Taylor, thank you so much for that comment. I think that pretty well sums up what we're trying to do with microtransit. Taylor, anything to add on that?
I don't think so. They summed it up pretty well themselves. We're absolutely looking for this service to help folks connect with the rest of our system or with other destinations and not need to rely on their vehicle, or if they do not have a vehicle, make sure that they're also able to access the same destinations.
Fantastic. So let's shift gears just a little bit to Express, where we have a number of changes proposed for our existing service. Christina in the comments brings up the 105, just wanting to ask whether it will still go to downtown Vancouver. Taylor, can you just clarify how that's going to work with the 134, 199 trips being folded into the 105, and how we'll designate which trips will stop in downtown Vancouver and which trips will bypass and go straight to Portland as the 134 199 does now.
Yeah, so you will absolutely be able to access the 105 in downtown Vancouver throughout the day, exactly like you do today. So we will have those trips between Salmon Creek, 99th Street Transit Center, downtown Vancouver, and downtown Portland all day long, and in the morning, the middle of the day, as well as in the evening. And I did mention that we're looking at adding both earlier and later trips to make that availability even greater. But we do want to make sure that folks that enjoy accessing downtown Portland out of Salmon Creek or 99th Street Transit Center that don't necessarily want to go through downtown Vancouver have an option that will allow them to make those trips quickly and efficiently. And so we'll be adding in select trips during the AM and PM commute periods that will be specially marked to note that they will be proceeding directly to downtown Portland or directly to 99th Street Transit Center um, for each of those trips, because we certainly don't want anyone to be getting on a bus that they're not intending to.
Certainly. And this would be the 105X designation that you mentioned earlier, correct? So folks will know when they get on the bus where it's going to stop.
Correct.
Okay. One other question we received before today related to Express came from Parker, who says, thank you for the extra trips on the 164. What about weekend service on that and other Express routes?
Absolutely. And we are continuously looking at opportunities to add service and assessing service needs based on our service standards and other metrics that we can use to determine where that service needs to go based on where we're able to provide it and how much we're able to provide. And feedback like that is really helpful to helping us figure out where riders like you need that additional service.
Yeah, and let's back up there just for a second for folks who might be wondering. I know we've gotten this question in the past before. Just generally, what is the process like behind the scenes for the way that C-TRAN decides which routes to make changes on and when to make those changes? And can you just talk a little bit about what that process looks like as far as reviewing routes day to day and what sort of metrics we use?
Sure. We have a set of adopted service standards, and service standards are metrics or ways that we can measure how service is performing. They're based on things like ridership, new development, or other factors that may influence where we provide service, how often we provide service, or where we may need to make changes. And we assess these on a regular basis. Typically, changes that result from this will occur 3 times per year at our typical service changes, one of which does tend to be a larger service change like what we are looking at here. But input and observations from riders, members of the community, our operators, and operations staff are always critical to helping us determine what these needs are.
Perfect. Um, and just to clarify, we get comments frequently from riders that have to do with any route, not necessarily one that's proposed for a specific service change. And we always want to hear that feedback. That's a big part of how we decide where to make those changes and what routes to review based on the feedback we hear from riders. So one comment that came in, kind of on that note, came from Dustin, who says, why no changes in Battleground? We don't have any commuter service like we used to have a few years ago, and traffic on 503 along Route 7 is getting worse in the Orchards area. Dustin, thank you for that comment. Again, that's exactly the kind of feedback we're looking for when we talk about future changes and changing conditions, because as Clark County grows and changes, we as a transit agency have to change with it. So really appreciate that type of feedback. Taylor, anything to add there?
I think I'll just say that with the changes that we're proposing here, what we're really aiming to do is put in place what we've been monitoring over the last year plus and make changes to our existing service to make it both work for riders as far as the trips that you may need to make, as well as an efficient service with the limited availability of service that we do have. And these new service offerings and new service routes are always input that we're looking for, and we'll continue to assess and make determinations on as we receive input just like this. So thank you.
Certainly. A couple more here we've got on the subject of express routes. One comment came earlier from Sam, who says, love the 164 proposal. Later in the evening would be a big help for me. An hourly midday service is a huge stress relief for when life happens. Thank you, Sam, for that feedback. That's really good to hear. That's certainly one of the goals we hope to accomplish, to add more flexibility for folks who use that service. Sam also says, I also love the on-demand service that you're trying, but I'm not in those areas. Very interested to see how it does. So are we, Sam. Thank you. We're hoping for the best. Pam also writes, I am a regular rider of the express buses 105 and 199. I am very supportive of adding more stops in the Lloyd district and adding a stop in Old Town. Thank you, Pam, for that feedback. Also, that's really good to hear. We hope that keeps those options open for folks who are commuting not just to downtown, but the Lloyd district and other areas, and making those connections in Portland. So thank you for that feedback. One other question that came in from Julie had to do with the 19 again. Julie says, what will happen to the 19 that serves Highway 99 and 112th Street? Again, just to reiterate, there's no changes proposed to the existing Route 19. That will continue to run as it does today. Is that right, Taylor?
That's absolutely correct. Route 19 and service along Highway 99 are really critical areas for us to serve, especially with the presence of WOC Vancouver and medical campuses in the area. And we are very anxious to see how this new microtransit service might be able to help support Route 19.
Excellent. So really quick, while we're kind of waiting on additional questions, we appreciate everybody who's weighed in so far. This is really good. We love hearing this feedback. Again, this is a very important part of any outreach process, and it goes a long way in determining the changes that we actually make. So want to just remind folks that after today, we have 2 more open house meetings. Beyond today, one is going to be August 25th from 4 to 6 p.m. at 99th Street Transit Center. We're also going to have another on September 7th at Turtle Place in downtown Vancouver. And then a formal public hearing will occur before the C-TRAN Board of Directors on the evening of September 14th. And as I mentioned before, we still do have an online comment form that anyone can use anytime. It's on the website at c-tran.com. There you can also take a closer look at all of the proposals we've talked about today and look at them in more detail and tell us what you think. Again, that's why we're here. So without too much more, I just want to, Taylor, any other kind of final comments or final thoughts on the overall service change and kind of the goal of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I will just say that the input from folks that are in with us today and continuing to submit feedback based on these service proposals is really critical to what we are doing and what we aim to do in January, because our goal is always to enhance service for the area that we serve in Clark County as well as we can. And we're very excited about these changes. Microtransit is a really new technology for us that we feel can enhance service significantly in the areas where we have it. So we'll be looking to monitor that and see if it might be a viable option in other parts of the system as well.
Fantastic. Taylor Ide is our senior planner. Taylor, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you all.
All right, just to wrap up again, thank you everyone who has joined us for this live online open house. The recording of this will be made available, of course, on the C-TRAN Facebook page. You can go back and check it out anytime. As I mentioned, there is also a website that you can submit comments anytime, c-tran.com/service adjustments. You can see the URL there on your screen. We're accepting comments through the middle of September as part of this process. Again, we want to hear from you. That's why we're here. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us online today. We'll see you at the next open house, and we'll see you on the bus.